Welcome back to the TV podcast on the Incomparable. We're starting a new rewatch podcast tonight, this time for the 1999 to 2004 sci-fi series Farscape. We're going to be covering every single episode, the good, the bad, and yes, the ugly. Each podcast will cover 2 episodes, and schedules willing, we'll be releasing a new episode every other week. I'll be your host tonight, Eric Scott, and joining me is my fellow escaped convict, Jason Johnson.
Hello, everybody.
All right, some quick background on Farscape. It was an Australian-American joint production series, produced originally for the Nine Network in Australia, and it aired here in the US on the Sci-Fi Channel from 1999 until 2002. So that was 4 seasons, each 22 episodes long. Then it was canceled on a nice, annoying cliffhanger, and then they managed to actually get the rights back and wrapped it up with the Peacekeeper Wars 2-part miniseries in 2004. So before we get started, just want to give everybody a little important note on what we found out when we started watching. For this rewatch, please use the episode order on Wikipedia, at least for season 1. As apparently we found out that the episode order on Amazon Prime is using the air date, not the production date. So that can cause some kind of like out of sync experiences where some characters reference stuff that hasn't happened yet if you watch the Amazon order. So for example, today we're doing seasons 1, episodes 1 and 2, according to the Wikipedia production order. But if you're watching Amazon, you'd be watching episodes 1 and 7. So that's a slight difference. So we'll try to add that Wikipedia link to the show notes, or you can just go to Wikipedia, look up Farscape, and go to the season 1 episode list. All right, enough admin trivia. Down to some fun. Jason, how did you get involved with Farscape? When did you start watching it? How much did you watch, et cetera, et cetera?
So, Farscape is one of those fun shows that I actually completely missed. I knew about it, it was in the periphery, sci fi community, all that kind of stuff. But at the time it aired, I had no access to any of the channels where it aired. There was obviously pre internet access and all that kind of stuff. So, at least in the middle of nowhere where I live. So, I actually completely missed it other than just kind of being aware of it and wishing I could watch it. I remember, I think it was one of the first ones I can remember outside of the Star Treks to have some of the puppets and stuff that the Muppets puppets. I don't know what we call the Farscape aliens, but I guess we'd have to defer to maybe one of the other podcasts on Muppets to know. But so I completely missed some of the airing of it. But it's always been one of the shows that I've wanted to rewatch and just never found the time. So completely new to me as we go through it.
And I'm kind of a hybrid of that. I knew it was on TV because we had Sci-Fi Channel back then. I think I was just recently married at the time, so I wasn't really interested, or we had other things to do, obviously, than watch TV. So I don't think I started watching it until late season 2, maybe. And I'm not sure if they're doing reruns back then, so I may have just kept going with season 2 and just kind of figured it out and just followed along as it went. And then I watched the whole rest of, seasons 2, 3, and 4. I was really mad, like I said before, when they ended it on a cliffhanger, like a la Blake 7, if you know that show where it ends and you're like, is everybody alive? Is everybody dead? What's going on? I hate this. It's canceled. And then 2 years later, they came out with that Peacekeeper War miniseries and wrapped up the whole thing and to a nice happy ending.
Yeah, I tend to be a completionist, so the fact that I couldn't start at the beginning was one of the reasons that I just kind of stayed away from it. Because if I can't, I figure if I missed it, I've already missed it, and I just kind of move on. So I'm glad to be able to go back to the beginning and work from there.
Yeah, because I had started rewatching this, I don't know, a year or two ago. I think I watched the first couple episodes, probably the Amazon order, and I was maybe confused in the beginning. But then we stopped for other things because, the next shiny TV series comes on and you stop watching the old stuff, watch the new stuff. So yeah, so I'm anxious to see what I've missed since I don't think I've seen everything before I started watching, you know, 20 years ago or whatever. So this will be fun.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Let's recap. We'll recap the first episode, talk about it. Didn't do the same thing for the second episode. So we begin, obviously, with Season 1, Episode 1, entitled Premiere. We open on Earth. IASA astronaut Commander John Crichton and his best friend DK are about to test their theory that a spacecraft can overcome atmospheric friction to exponentially increase its speed using only a planet's national gravitational pull. That's basically a long-winded way of saying it's a more better slingshot maneuver, I guess. On his way to the space shuttle, carrying his Farscape 1 spacecraft, we meet John's father and former astronaut Jack Crichton. Jack gives his son a puzzle ring, originally given to him for good luck by cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, and he tells John that he will get the chance to be his own kind of hero. The Farscape 1 launch goes as normal. However, during a critical moment, Mission Control detects some kind of electromagnetic wave approaching Farscape 1. It hits the ship and sends it through a wormhole to somewhere else. When Crichton finally regains his wits, he sees that he's nowhere near Earth and in the middle of a pursuit between several small ships and a much larger ship. Farscape 1 is clipped by one of the smaller ships, which spins out of control and crashes into an asteroid. Then Farscape 1 is pulled inside the large ship's hangar bay. Inside the hangar, a small drone appears outside of Farscape 1's canopy, startling John. Just then a fire breaks out inside his ship. John grabs his fire extinguisher, leaves the ship, and puts out the fire. And then two more drones appear and force John to march through the ship to what looks like a large command center with two aliens standing there. The large male warrior-like alien grabs Crichton by the throat, lifting him off his feet Darth Vader style, and speaks something in a strange language, while another alien, a bald blue female, looks on. John is injected by one of the drones and can now suddenly understand the alien's language. Hey, that's pretty convenient. That takes care of several sci-fi plot devices right there. They tell him that they only brought him on board because of his ship and his technology that they think they can use to help escape their attacking ships. Since he's pretty much choking Crichton to death and getting nowhere, the large warrior throws Crichton across the deck. The warrior demands then help from a third alien he calls Pilot, who appears on the view screen. Pilot says he can't help while the ship's control collar remains in place. As the warrior starts yanking at tubes beneath the control panel, I guess to try to free the ship, we meet yet another alien, a small frog-like alien on a hover chair who tells John that he'll look after him now if John will look after him later, whatever that means. And, well, the warrior's random destruction seems to work as the control collar on the ship is released. The warrior then yells for something called a starburst. Blue energy builds up on the hull, and the ship, whose name we learn is Moya, flies into the tunnel that creates in space and disappears, but not before taking one of the smaller attacking ships with them. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the carrier ship that the fighters came from, we meet Captain Crace, who learns that two of his fighters are missing. One of those fighters was piloted by his brother, and yeah, you guessed it, that's the one that clipped Crichton's ship and was destroyed. He vows that the pilot of that ship will pay for his brother's death. Back on board Moya, they aren't sure where Moya starburst to. During their arguing about it, the warrior knocks Crichton out by striking him with his really, really long tongue. Ugh. And then we learn more about our aliens. All of them were apparently prisoners. The blue alien is Pau Zotozan, a Delvian priest imprisoned for anarchy. The large warrior is Ka Dargo, a Luxan imprisoned for killing his commanding officer. And the frog-like alien is Rigel the 16th, dominar of over 600 billion Hynarians, or so he says. His throne was usurped by his cousin, and he was imprisoned. Crichton wakes up naked in the cell on board Moya. Rigel's outside and tells him that his clothes were removed so they could examine him. John finds some clothes to put on in the cell and sees that there's another person in there with him. The Prowler pilot Moya Starburst took along. John introduces himself to his cellmate, who promptly kicks his butt, pins him to the floor, and demands to know his rank and regiment. We learn that she is Officer Aaron Sun, a peacekeeper. Later, the handcuffed Crichton and Aaron are being fed by their captors. Zahn explains that Moya is a living organic ship, but can't travel fast because of the damage Dargo caused when he tried to release Moya's control collar, and that they're on their way to a commerce planet for supplies to help fix Moya. When the aliens go down to the planet, John and Aaron escape their cell, and they also go down to the planet in Aaron's prowler, and on the surface, Aaron transmits their location to Captain Crace's ship. When Dargo learns that John and Aaron have escaped and that a Peacekeeper command carrier is approaching the planet, he tells Zahn they have to leave. Aaron and John see Moya's transport pod flying away, and when they try to get back to Aaron's ship, Dargo appears in front of them. John tries to warn Dargo about the command carrier, but just then, Captain Crace shows up with several of his armed soldiers. Crace interrogates Crichton and accuses him of murdering his brother, but Aaron surprisingly comes to his defense, saying she doesn't believe John intentionally murdered Crace's brother. Crace then accuses Aaron of being irreversibly contaminated from spending time with John, and all three of them are handcuffed and taken away. One of the Peacekeeper soldiers searches John and discovers the ring given to him way back in Act 1. Crichton explains it's a puzzle, and while the soldier is playing with it, John steals the soldier's gun and demands the keys to the handcuffs. John insists that Aaron also come with them, as he apparently is no longer a Peacekeeper in good standing. Once they all get back on Moya, Crace's command carrier is closing on them real fast. They can't starburst again because Moya's energy reserves are too low. Then John has the bright idea and explains his slingshot maneuver to the crew. They seem kind of skeptical, but Dargo persuades Aaron to give it a shot and pilot Moya as Crichton instructs her on what to do. So kind of like in Act 1, this time Aaron pilots Moya into the atmosphere, increasing their velocity until John tells her to pull up. And then Moya flies away at an incredible speed, far too fast for Crace's command carrier to catch up. Later, Crichton is alone on Moya, repairing the drone that he damaged earlier when he first arrived on Moya. He's recording a message to his father and talks about the weird, amazing, psychotic life he's encountered. And Crichton says that he'll never stop trying to find his way back home. I guess before we get into some discussion topics, just found a couple little trivia tidbits online. Apparently, Crichton was going to be a NASA astronaut, but NASA wanted script approval for the use of their logos, so NASA became the IASA, which I guess stands for the International Aeronautics and Space Administration.
That's generic, so it works.
You know, and the logo looks almost identical, so it's just got I instead of N. So I guess that passed copyright and infringing
That's right.
things. Also, even on the Amazon episode list or order, this is the only episode where there's no voiceover during the credits, which you'll hear on episode 2. And a couple things I found interesting about the two Muppets, puppets, whatever you want to call them, was that the pilot, the character Muppet pilot, was a really large puppet, about 6 to 8 feet tall. His head was like 3 feet deep and 2 feet wide, and it was apparently the most sophisticated puppet ever built at that time by the Henson Creature Shop.
That was
And
before Elmo, right?
yeah, well, I don't know, but or at least not as popular as Elmo. Yeah, and apparently you would think being that big it would be controlled by a lot of people, but it was entirely computer controlled and allowed uh, only a single puppeteer to handle it. Conversely, Rigel, on the other hand, was animated by at least 4 puppeteers. John Eccleston, the main puppeteer who does the voice also, did the head with one hand and then had like a control on his belt to do the lip syncing with the lips with his other hand. And then we had another puppeteer doing his facial expressions and eye movements, and another puppeteer working each hand.
So teamwork.
Yep, lots of teamwork. It takes a village to run a puppet, I guess.
Yep.
All right, so what do you think about episode 1?
I thought it was a typical kind of introduction episode. I will give them credit for skipping a lot of the crew introduction and throwing you right in. It makes for a little bit of a confusing mechanism because you're still struggling to keep up. And it was, for an intro, it was a one-parter, right? We didn't get like a multi-part introduction. It was just one episode and go. So that was an interesting. It took me a while and actually a couple watches to catch all the names and kind of figure out what everybody was supposed to be. Actually, while we were watching it, my son even looked over at me and goes, "What is pilot?" Because we were kind of confused as to his function. I mean, not function. Obviously, that's in the name, but is he supposed to be part of the ship? Is he a separate person who stays there? You don't really kind of get a lot of information about some of the characters. But again, points for not spending 2 episodes on Earth before they actually launch into space. You just kind of get it and go. So
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much like, yeah, here's Earth. Yeah, it's where Crichton comes from. That's not the important part of the show. Let's get in space. Let's get to the other side of the universe and, go from there.
yeah, I did find it interesting that they even spent time on some of the characters, right? Like they made a point of having his best friend be the other one who came up with the experiment with him, when that character could have just kind of been combined with his father and completely sidestepped. But they wanted to kind of flesh it out even more, even though the character was there for a few minutes, and then once the shuttle took off and he flew through the wormhole in the first few minutes, it's done. So
Yeah, and even like on the ship, we had that, I don't know, chair moving, plot moving, part where all the characters explain to each other, oh yeah, I'm an escaped prisoner too, and my name is this, and here's why I'm here. Here's why I'm a prisoner. I killed my commanding officer. Oh, I'm an anarchist. Oh, I'm a former ruler. So they kind of jammed every character into like a 3-minute scene. Exposition.
Yeah, we just need little badges that says "Hello, my name is." But again,
Yeah,
points for moving the plot along and actually showing more action and less. They told us, but they told us quickly. So
yeah, yeah. I'm kind of glad they didn't explain either, like the Crichton's version of the slingshot maneuver, other than like I guess the only difference is from a normal go around the planet and build up speed is you're going through the atmosphere and somehow building up speed. But whatever, I don't need like tech to tech, heavy science like Star Trek, technobabble. Just we're on Earth, we gotta get them over out to outer space somewhere. Let's just get them right there as soon as we can,
yeah,
and just half explain it so it makes kind of sense.
and as a child of the '80s, I'm always happy to see space shuttle footage, even if it's stock footage. It just kind of brings me back. So
And I guess I'm sure we'll see Crichton's father later, because you got like well, to me, a big name actor, Kent McCord, playing Crichton's father. I remember Kent from Adam 12, growing up in the 70s, and I even had an Adam 12 lunchbox among other lunchboxes back in grade school. So I'm assuming, and plus because Crichton's recording, notes to him or something, that assuming he's going to show up later.
yeah, kind of a precursor to the Iron Man recording into his helmet kind of thing from modern
Mhm.
time. But it's good to see the traditional cassette recorder. I will say that that's one of the things I would have liked to have seen them spend time on at the beginning is setting up his relationship with his dad a little more. I mean, we get kind of a walk down the tunnel to the ship, as he's walking him out scene, but they could have set up a little more interaction between the two of them since that may be a plot device going forward is him talking to his dad and all that. But again,
Yeah,
economy of time. So
yeah. I mean, that's not the real focus, so you have to move on. But they did try to set it up at least where it's kind of like his dad was an astronaut. He walked on the moon. I guess he was a big name. So Crichton kind of feels like he's in his shadow. Like he's not, I guess, not getting the recognition he deserves, but more like I guess he has to probably try harder because he's the son of the great Jack Crichton.
and they set it up as his dad was the traditional probably military officer who became an astronaut kind of warrior astronaut, and Crichton's well, John Crichton is more of our scientist, explorer, peaceful type character. So it kind of brings him in as not being a warrior, right? He didn't come in with military experience or anything. At least that's the assumption.
Yeah, I mean they don't make a deal out of it. It's more like he's a scientist and he and his friend thought up this theory and they're out there testing it. He's not the military astronaut. He's just like a civilian astronaut. Yeah.
Right.
And another kind of thing I liked where, apart from like the technobabble-ish, just get out of the way and go half across the universe, the other trope they kind of get away with is the universal translator. So, Crichton gets injected by some microbes from one of those little drones and suddenly can understand everybody. Very like Babelfish like.
Yeah, yeah, and it skips the let me pull out my translator and type in what you said or have it listen to you, and we just kind of gloss that over. One quick injection and we move on. So
Yeah, or just assume that everybody somehow can understand each other and we don't talk about it.
yeah,
And I'm sure they'll not talk about this again either, but at least we know if you watch the first episode, okay, this is how everybody understands each other. Let's just move on.
yeah.
Yeah,
English is the common language of the space. It's no big deal.
exactly. All right, so this is the first episode. Like we said before, we got, plot dump, character dump. So what do we kind of think about so far anyway, each of our main characters? I know you kind of talked about Crichton a little bit, but what's your initial impressions about Crichton?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think they went out of their way to point out he's the scientist, he's not the fighter. There wasn't a lot of chance for him to do any of that other than the science experiment stuff at the end where he maps out his solution, which we're going to gloss over the lack of actual variables. I mean, he doesn't really know the atmosphere makeup or the size and mass of the planet or anything fun. We'll just assume Moya could tell him all that. But yeah, I think they have set him up to be a proxy for the audience without knowing what's going on and all the fun stuff. So
Mhm.
again, we'll see where we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like in one way, like the smart alecky, way over his head, but by luck or moxie or whatever. He just kind of gets through everything. Uh, kind of more lucky than skillful.
Yeah, except for the math. He's skillful
Yeah,
at math.
yeah. Huh. We were told to be no math, right? So
Yeah, well, not in this show, evidently.
yeah, right. And Dargo kind of comes off, at least right now, as like your typical warrior mentality. Kind of like if we're comparing to the other big show at the time, Star Trek, then Dargo is basically Worf. And I guess you can kind of equate Luxon's maybe to Klingons. He's got that warrior mentality, maybe honorable, definitely quick to anger, a good fighter, sort of. I mean, he does get captured, but he does get free eventually.
Yeah, I mean, not to spoil episode 2, but he's 2 for 2 so far. Uh,
Yeah, right.
but yeah, I think you got they wanted to have their warrior. I think it's kind of neat to have him. When they're doing their backstory exposition, they discover that they discuss the fact that he's very young and only been on 2 campaigns or something. So,
Hmm.
while he's obviously a warrior race, he's not necessarily the senior expert from the warrior race. So it kind of gives him a chance to hopefully play with inexperience as well as his confidence.
Yeah, he's still young, brash, probably thinks he's invulnerable, like most young people, and that'll probably get him into some trouble, and probably some good stories later.
Yeah,
Zahn uh, didn't really have too much to do in the first episode. The second one we'll get into, she does quite a lot. But kind of one of the things that happened in the first episode where she was working on one of the consoles, they kind of speeded up the footage, like she's like got super speed or something. I wasn't quite sure what that is. I guess maybe we'll see more of that fleshed out later.
yeah, and again, really short introductions on these characters. She's an uh, anarchist leader. Actually, I think is how she terms it. But again, I'm not really sure what that means in her world. I, I kept kind of flashing on her to being kind of like Inara from Firefly, right? The kind of mystical, religious aspect to her that they kind of played up in Inara is very reminiscent to what I saw in her character. So,
Yeah, as we learned in the second episode, yeah, well, she does have some priestly abilities or skills that like mystical in nature, right?
right.
And Rigel, again, the first episode, and don't really learn much about him other than, I don't know, I guess being royalty, or if that's a Dominar's, I guess if he's like a kind of analog to a king, I guess he has that kind of like aloof, kind of superior attitude. I guess he's trying to schmooze Crichton for some reason. Like, if you watch after me, I'll watch after you. Like he's trying to like basically be everybody's buddy and get everybody's good side so that nobody, I guess, stomps on him because he's probably the littlest guy on the ship, right?
Yeah, and then of course the warning at the very end where he wants to take some of Crichton's equipment and asks him, are you a light sleeper? So he's obviously feels entitled to whatever he feels like he wants. Has that kind of royalty mentality to him. Um, Again, also seems to be as is kind of traditional for this time period, the comic relief character, right? He's the one that just kind of floats around and they can interject into any scenes. I don't know if I'd call him an Orko, but something along those lines.
And then we get to Pilot, which is probably, I guess, at least in the first episode, the least used character. Kind of not much to him yet. Just kind of, obviously he's the pilot. Helps fly Moya, and basically, is updating the crew all the time on what's going on.
Yeah, this was one where I would like a little more. Hopefully, we'll get a little more explanation. Is his race kind of always have a symbiotic relationship with um, the ships, or do they is he special, or is it just the fact that he's in there? It seems like they use him, especially since he communicates through the screens, almost as an analog, a living analog for a ship's computer from Star Trek, or maybe even an astromech, right? Where he's kind of the interface to Moya, but we don't actually get him out and do anything. He just kind of stays plugged in all the time.
Yeah, because it seems like he's more like either like empathetic or telepathic with Moya, because obviously Moya's not speaking and not saying anything, but he's interpreting or saying what she's feeling or what she's seeing or something like that. So that could be interesting if they explore that more.
And that's why I was saying maybe is it a symbiotic relationship? Because I mean, is he like he doesn't seem to leave the room, so I'm guessing he is connected somehow.
And I guess rounding out the final member of the crew is Aaron, who, at least in this first episode, obviously didn't start out being part of the crew. She wasn't an escaped prisoner like the rest of them. Did a pretty good job of not wanting to be a part of them and wanting to escape, get away. Even after Crace had said, she's irreversibly contaminated, and I think Dargo at one point said that's like, a death sentence or something, that she still wanted to stay behind. Like it's her duty. Like, she's very, it sounds like she's very, almost like Dargo, like, honor, duty, wants to serve, even to, her death, apparently.
Yeah, and they obviously, aside from Crichton, I think she got the most character. I don't want to say development, but fleshing out in this episode. Right? They had to spend a lot of time explaining why she would need to be part of the crew and willing to turn her back on her people. She was a more fully explained in, I think, this episode. The other interesting thing is that they made her human or human-like. She's not a person in costume. She's not a puppet. So she gets to be the human analog that Crichton relates to, and I don't know if they're going as far as attracted to, but definitely kind of is more some compatible with, just because of feeling like he's got another quote human to interact with.
Yeah, and even back when they first, introduced to each other in the cell, where she's asking him like for his rank and regiment, like she thinks that he's also like a peacekeeper. So I don't know if everyone that looks like them in that side of the world, that universe, are all peacekeepers. Are they all part of that same organization? And there's no civilians, or is it just because he had like a uniform looking thing on? Well, I guess no, he didn't. He had just normal clothes on. So yeah, she just assumed he must have been someone else like her.
Right. So it'll be interesting where they take that from there.
And then finally, I guess we get our big bad, at least for this episode, probably for the season, given that quote unquote Crichton killed his brother, is Captain Crace. Kind of seems like your typical, I don't want to say evil mustache twirling commander, but he's got that like arrogant authority. He's like sometimes berating his staff. Sometimes they seem afraid of him, sometimes they don't. And kind of seems like, at least in this episode anyway, he's going against his orders by going after Moya and to capture his brother's killer. So I don't know if that's going to have any repercussions later. If we see more of Peacekeeper Authority or more Peacekeeper ships other than this one, we'll see.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's going to depend on how big they make the peacekeeper, you know, army. Right? Is it a large, unit, and he's just got one small ship out of it, or is he a pretty high ranking, and therefore he'll have less repercussions and can go off on his own? That'll be an interesting thing to see. I almost picture him as the analog for the colonel in A Team, who's constantly tracking them down. They're going to bounce from place to place, doing good and interacting with locals, and he's going to be one step behind them, giving chase and motivating the plot. So it'll be kind of interesting if they can have chase scenes and flip a couple jeeps. We'll be in good shape.
Right. And I guess now that they're off in these uncharted territories, I think they call it, uncharted region, that apparently these peacekeepers don't have much of a presence out there. So yeah, now if he's gone totally rogue and is chasing after Crichton way outside his jurisdiction, yeah, that could be interesting.
Yep. All right, and that brings us to episode 2 of season 1, titled IET. We start out on board Moya as a loud siren is going off all over the ship. Pilot eventually neutralizes the noise, but clarifies that he's only dampened the noise, that the beacon is still going off. Aaron identifies the siren as a beacon that was installed on Moya during her captivity, which is broadcasting the location to any peacekeeper ship nearby. John suggests that they can reduce the beacon's range by submerging it in water, and by it, the entire ship, right? There's a nearby planet they pass that fits the bill. Pilot clarifies that it's risky, but Moya's willing to try. I believe there's actually a reference to the fact that he tells some story about another Leviathan possibly trying this maneuver, but it's only a story. They're not really sure if it'll work. They land on the planet, but it's actually not just water. It's a watery bog, and Moya begins sinking in the mud. The beacon temporarily handled, the crew turns to Hal to remove it from Moya's primary neural nexus. Rigel is the only one small enough to get into the section where it is. There's a restriction and security thing to keep the little droid robots from actually getting in there. Pilot says the removal will cause Moya great pain and she may even die. They discuss the situation and discover that there's a common anesthetic called chlorium that would help dull Moya's pain, but there's none currently on the ship because it's one of the few cargoes that they're not allowed to transport. John, Dargo, and Aaron leave Moya and go to track down some of it on the planet. John said, as they kind of explore the planet, John says that the planet reminds him of Louisiana or possibly Dagobah, and kind of makes a Yoda reference to Aaron, who completely misses it. Using a tracking device to follow the chlorium, they run into some locals who probably saw or heard the ship land and have come to investigate. Dargo and Aaron lead the locals away so John can continue the search. After a while, he discovers a barn next to a huge antenna array. In the barn, he discovers fertilizer that gives off a strong chlorium reading. He contacts the others but hears someone approaching. John hides as a young boy enters the barn. The boy, an unspecified alien, spots John quickly and John introduces himself. The boy says his name is Fostro, but he then runs away when John tells him he's from outer space. Crichton runs into the boy's house after him, and Fostro shoots him with a large one-light device that paralyzes him. Fostro's mother shows up and is surprised to see an alien from outer space lying on her kitchen floor. The paralysis wears off, and Crichton explains who he is. The mother is scared and tries to leave, but Crichton bluffs her to get them to stay. Back on the ship, Moya's pain is getting worse. Zahn decides they can't wait for the others and persuades Rigel to help. Zahn will use some of her priestly skills to help share Moya's pain. This is kind of the priestly abilities we kind of hinted to earlier, in hopes that will give Rigel enough time to remove the beacon. Back in the house, John explains to the mother, Linnea, what he's looking for and tells her he understands what she must be going through meeting someone from another planet. Linnea makes breakfast while explaining that she works for the military who funds her search for extraterrestrial life. John will be a great prize, but she's concerned how the military would treat him. While she's serving the food, Crichton's analyzer goes off, which freaks her and Fostro out. John scans the food and finds there's chlorium in the breakfast. He tracks it to a large can in the kitchen and asks what's in it. Just then, they hear vehicles approaching. The military has shown up. Fostro hides John in his room. On Moya, Rigel keeps cutting the beacon free, but it causes Moya intense pain and Zahn passes out. Pilot calls and says the water and atmospheric pressure is getting too much for Moya. Linnea does her best to convince the military that she's still checking her data about where the spaceship landed and doesn't know where it is yet. The military leaves the house for now. Aaron returns to Moya, and Rigel wants to leave, but Pilot refuses. Zahn says Rigel needs to keep removing the beacon, but he doesn't want to. Aaron tries to grab him, and he bites her arm. Zahn realizes Rigel is afraid, and he confesses that he doesn't know what he's doing, as he had always had servants to do everything for him. Meanwhile, Crichton is explaining wormholes to Linnea, who understands the theory, being a fellow scientist. She helps John contact Pilot using her communication gear. Then Fostro comes in, saying the military caught an alien outside. Crichton looks out the window and sees Dargo surrounded. Dargo is tied up in the barn, and Linnea gets mad at John and demands to know what kind of ship he was on. He says that while he's a scientist, the others were prisoners. Linnea gives him a sack of chlorium and tells him to leave, but he won't go without Dargo. Linnea shows the military commander the recording of Pilot talking to John and gives him false coordinates, which causes most of the military to leave, giving Fostro a chance to distract the guards, and John sneak up behind them and knock them out with a shovel, freeing Dargo. John thanks Linnea and kisses her goodbye, which apparently isn't a custom on their planet. Fostro shakes Dargo's hand and says goodbye. Back on Moya, Rigel finally finishes cutting the beacon free. John and Dargo arrive, and Aaron tells Pilot to take off, but Pilot can't because Moya is still in too much pain. John arrives just in time to give Rigel the chlorium, and they spread it on Moya's wounds. He even eats some of it, because why not? The chlorium works, and Pilot takes Moya back into space. Aaron finds John watching the planet through a window and asks if he's going to miss that rock. Not that rock, John answers, meaning possibly something else he's leaving behind. A couple of trivia items from this episode. There's a point where Aaron says crap instead of dren, which is one of the only times that Earth words were unintentionally spoken by non-human characters within the series. On the set, the actors would often use real words when rehearsing a scene. And another interesting fact is, despite not having the translator microbes injected into them, the population of the planet is evidently able to understand Crichton and the rest of the crew. This came up as a question in the pilot's log, which was something that Sci-Fi Channel kept during the series' run. And according to pilot in the log, the planet must have had contact with other worlds because the soil contained translator microbes, enabling the natives to understand the crew of Moya. So, Eric, what did you think of this episode?
Uh, I guess good and bad. I mean, it's a good second episode. You know, they kind of build off what happened in the first episode. You know, the crew is still trying to figure each other out, but kind of the plot. I like some of the plot, which we'll talk about in a minute. But then others, it's like the kind of like the old trope of like, you know, of course aliens land in the middle of a swamp, and there's like, you know, country bumpkins out hunting for them, and you know, with their guns and their dogs, and but then the
Yeah,
rest of it made
it
more
seemed
sense
like a
after
really
that part. But
it seemed like a really quick jump to me to for a second episode to right away throw them into a place that an untechnological society, right? I mean, here from our point of view, we finally made it into space. We've got a bunch of aliens. We've got spaceships and all this kind of stuff, and immediately they throw us into an alien race that basically this is first contact, right? This is their first interaction with quote aliens. So it seemed really quick in a run to do that. Like you said, it did kind of flow plot wise from the previous episode on them needing supplies and trying to figure out how to escape and all the things that are going on as part of their escape. But it just seemed really quick in a run, in my opinion, to jump to the untechnological alien civilization.
yeah, and apparently, you know, everybody understands each other, even on this planet that supposedly has had no contact with alien life before, and no one would have known this, even with that, you know, note that they did on the Sci-Fi Channel. So it's just, yeah, okay, whatever. You know, I'll hand wave that one away just because.
Yeah, it's almost like they forgot and assumed that the microbes allowed everybody to speak the native language, not just understand. It just kind of glossed that point over and moved on.
I mean, the better parts of this episode, besides the overall plot notwithstanding, was basically, you know, getting more character development, especially this time around with Zahn and Rigel, who, as we said before in the first episode, almost had nothing really to do. So at least this time they were kind of, you know, integral to the, I guess you want to call it the B plot on Moya. Zahn's revealed that, you know, she's got these mystical powers where she can't dull people's pains or creatures' pains, but she can like share it. Which I guess being like, you know, if she shares it, you know, then she's taking some of it away more or less, and helping Moya kind of get through the pain as Rigel's, you know, cutting out the beacon from her, you know, neural nexus there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it's a good point that while they didn't get a whole lot of development, it was more the other characters in episode one. Zahn and Rigel both get a good amount of character time in this episode with Zahn. I think this is where my relation to her and Inara as kind of the priestly role came from. And Rigel gets the great line about he always had servants to do this for him, so now he's having to learn to function on his own and give himself some development as well. And that just kind of leaves, I've already lost his name, Dargo, as just his character development is he can get caught. So yeah,
Yeah, which I guess does kind of prove that Dargo is the new Worf because, you know, every episode of Star Trek, Worf basically gets his butt kicked by everybody. You know, aliens, when Troy got possessed by an alien, she beat him up. So basically anybody can beat up Worf. So far, yeah, Rigel, Dargo's like, yeah, 0 for 2 on the big tough warrior department.
I will mention since we're talking about Dargo that one of my favorite scenes from this was the scene where he and Aaron are kind of observing Crichton and just kind of hold up. And due to the fact that this show's old enough to be in 4:3 filming, the characters are basically like sitting on top of each other in the tree or whatever they were supposed to be in, which I thought was pretty funny because you've got these warrior tough characters and they're basically sitting in each other's lap.
Yeah, hiding from strange locals and their dogs or hounds or whatever they were.
Yeah, everybody needs a hunting dog, man.
That's right, even out in the middle of the swamp in the middle of nowhere, yeah, on the foreign planet.
Where else would you keep your hunting dogs but the swamp?
That's right. Now, one of the things that I guess it was good but confusing is obviously Fostro and Linnea. are having the same kind of experiences that Crichton just had how many days, hours, minutes ago, where all he's known is just humankind, only people on their own planet, and suddenly he's in the middle of all these aliens. So she's got the same thing going where, finally her dreams come true. There's an alien from another planet right in front of her. She can talk to him, she can see him, she can learn from him, maybe. And it just kind of, it's a good parallel that basically, everything that John probably has experienced or has been feeling for the last couple of months or weeks, he can now find someone he can relate to.
Yeah, and of course they did it on a planet that reminded him of home, with a character who was a scientist like him, and experiencing aliens for the first time like him, and just was almost a complete mirror image of his life, except for she didn't go into space. She was searching from the planet, but almost, a Wonder One analog of his current situation.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much they're like at the same kind of technology level as Earth, and apart from just the sets looking like a normal barn, a normal house, a normal kitchen, they take him to Foster's bedroom, which looks like a normal kid's bedroom. So yeah, he's basically surrounded by, yeah, that feeling of home. I don't know if he was getting kind of homesick or if he was just
Or
seeing a
Dagobah,
little
take your pick.
yeah, or take at least the swamp part, right? But the part that kind of confused me at the end was when he, like, I don't know how long he was on the planet, a couple hours maybe, I don't know, but he seems to have this, I don't know if it's like a relationship with Linnea or something, where like when they're leaving, he kisses her on the cheek and she like looks shocked and he's like, "Oh, I guess you don't do that here." But so I'm just trying to figure out, is it, was she like a love? Was he like in love with her or just sorry to leave? These feelings of home or something. I couldn't quite figure it out.
Yeah, I think I'm going to chalk that up to homesickness, right? I mean, he's it's his first planet that reminds him of home. It's his second planet total, but it's his first one that reminds him of home, and a civilization that reminds him of home, and a person that reminds him of home. So I'm giving him credit for this is just a homesick episode, and we'll move on because I kind of mentioned it when I said that was she was Aaron was the only other character that they made a human analog looking person, and I kind of get the feeling that she's supposed to be the long term love interest on the show as it goes on. But I guess they wanted to give John a Captain Kirk moment on the planet first, and introduce him to a couple aliens, and then let him go off. I'm not really sure uh, what they were going for there, but I'll go with the homesick angle and move on, I think.
Yeah, and I guess, yeah, being the, like you said, the lead of the show, it's nice for him to have his moment.
And he
Yeah,
gets to relate this, some people who are not. I mean, he does encounter the military, but they're not peacekeepers. They're not shooting at him in space. They're not on a death hunt to hunt him down because he killed their brother. So he gets a little bit of time to interact with other aliens.
yeah. Although to Linnea's point though, like if she did turn him over to the military, what would they have done with him? Probably the same thing that Crace had said he wanted to do to Crichton, like examine him, like dissect him, learn what makes him tick. Which that's your typical military movie TV reaction to aliens, right?
Well, and the title of the episode was IET, so we get our ET reference there too.
You have an episode full of aliens landing on a foreign planet trope.
No Reese's Pieces though. I was disappointed. No Reese's Pieces.
Yeah. Although apparently that chlorine must taste really good. It's they use it for baking. Rigel just eats it raw. I mean, must be some good. It's also an anesthesia. It's like the old Saturday Night Live skit where it's a floor wax. It's a dessert topping. No, it's both.
Multi-purpose.
I also kind of like that Rigel's kind of getting the reputation, I guess, of being like a glutton. He was eating a lot on the first episode when they're eating dinner. Now he's like wolfing down random cargo like that they bring on board the ship for
Well,
anesthesia. And suddenly he's like, oh, it's not, this smells great. Let me eat some of it. I don't even know it's anesthesia, but hey, maybe it tastes great. I don't know.
he was pretty clear in that first episode when they were looking for supplies that he needed something to make the food taste good. So maybe he found it.
Yeah, always got to carry your special seasoning with you wherever you go, right? So,
That's right.
all right. Any final comments before we wrap up this inaugural episode?
No, I mean, like I say, for our first two episodes, you get a little bit about what you expect. I'm definitely in to see where we go from here. It's definitely a product of its time, right? I mean, and trust me, I'm in it for that time. I am fondly remembering that time, but it's very 90s, early 2000s show, and you get the good with that and the bad, the tropes that come into play in these shows, but also good characters and good actors. So I'm enjoying to see where we go from here.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. It's now what, 20, 21 years old, 22 years old. So it does kind of show it a little bit. But, for first couple episodes, the first one, obviously they have to, start moving all the chairs, introducing you to everybody, kind of large cast, and, you kind of got to they scare by the little moment in the beginning. The second episode, I mean, apart from the overall plot, which is not that great, it was more, you get more character development, get to learn more about the characters to get you more engaged in the show, which is obviously their goal, so they want you to keep watching, right? So yeah, I'm pretty much excited to see where this goes, to fill in my gaps with this first season, maybe season and a half of Farscape, see what I missed, and then see where it kind of built into when I started watching it. Because I missed all that backstory, all that world building, all that character development, the characters gelling, getting to know each other, and all that. So yeah, I'm anxious to see where this goes in the next several months, years as we do this. We'll see how long it goes.
That's right. A bite at a time. A bite at a time. So
Yep.
looks like next we've got season 1, episode 3, Exodus from Genesis, and season 1, episode 4, Throne for a Loss.
Yep, and remember that's the Wikipedia order, not the Amazon order, which I think on Amazon it's episodes 2 and 3, not 3 and 4.
That's
Just make a note of that so we don't watch the wrong thing next time.
that's good. At least we don't have to go like 8-2 or something. We get to go back to a somewhat normal order for the next 2 episodes anyway.
Yep. All right, so until next time, that's your homework. Episodes 3 and 4. We'll see you next time.